Can you bring me the insurance card? 5 words. A simple request between romantic partners. The kind of everyday favor that happens in relationships across America every single day. But for 29-year-old Merseana Struggs, those 5 words became her death sentence. What started as an ordinary afternoon in Houston became a nightmare that would expose the deadliest form of domestic violence. The kind that destroys successful women who dare to act like they own their own lives. A thriving OnlyFans entrepreneur who refused to share her earnings. A car she bought with her own money that her boyfriend treated as his property. An insurance card request that was never about paperwork. It was about testing who really controlled her life. Gunshots echoing through a Houston apartment complex. A young mother running desperately for survival. And a man who decided that if he couldn't possess her completely, then no one could. This isn't just another true crime story. This is a wake-up call about financial abuse, digital age domestic violence, and why the moment you try to leave becomes the moment you're most likely to die. How does financial independence become a motive for murder? How does asking for your own property back trigger an execution? Today, we're diving into the horrific murder of Merseana Struggs and why her story should terrify anyone who thinks domestic violence looks the same as it did decades ago. Before we dive into this shocking case, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, smash that like button if you're ready for another deep dive into true crime. Second, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest investigations. And third, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I love connecting with our true crime community around the world. Now, let's get into the heartbreaking story of Merseana Struggs and uncover how an ordinary day turned into an unthinkable tragedy. Before we witness the horror of July 19, 2024, you need to understand exactly who Merseana Struggs was, because she represented everything that should be celebrated in America, not destroyed. At 29, Merseana embodied entrepreneurial courage. When life in Harvey, Louisiana wasn't providing opportunities for herself and her 8-year-old son, she made the bravest decision possible, packed up everything and moved to Houston, chasing something better. That kind of courage, leaving everything familiar with nothing but hope and determination, defined who she was. Friends and family knew her as Murray, a woman with infectious laughter and unwavering loyalty. Her sister Kamani called her our family's rock, the person everyone turned to when life got hard. But Merseana was more than supportive family member. She was a businesswoman. Working tirelessly to provide for her child, she built a successful OnlyFans business. She maintained clear professional boundaries, making it known she was selling content only, never meeting clients in person. She was committed to maximizing earnings for her family's future. Her neighbor at Park at Cumberland Apartments, Shawnee Drury, remembered she was beautiful, kind, and a loving mother. You could see how much she cared about her son. Everything Merseana did centered around that boy. Every late night creating content, every dollar saved, every dream of someday owning her own home. It was all for him. The 2018 Honda Civic she drove represented more than transportation. It symbolized independence earned through her own hard work. She was building the American dream one subscription at a time, proving that success comes in many forms and that a mother's love drives the most incredible entrepreneurial spirit. But while Merseana was building financial independence, a threat lurked in her present. Someone who viewed her success not as admirable, but as something he was entitled to control. Someone who saw her independence as a challenge to be destroyed. Nicholas Finley would soon show her exactly what he thought of women who dared to act like they owned their own businesses, their own cars, and their own lives. July 19, 2024 began like countless others. But this day would end with a successful businesswoman dead for the crime of independence. Merseana had made a decision that put her in the most dangerous category of domestic violence victim. She was leaving Nicholas Finley for good. That decision, experts tell us, increases a woman's chance of being murdered by 75%. With a gun involved, that risk jumps to 500%. The call came that afternoon with deceptive normalcy. Finley's voice probably carried that familiar tone of urgency mixed with entitlement that Merseana had learned to recognize. He claimed he'd been pulled over while driving her car and needed her insurance card. On the surface, reasonable. Boyfriend needs girlfriend's help with paperwork. But examine the layers of control already embedded in this simple request. Finley was driving Merseana's car without her. Not borrowing it for a specific errand, but using her property as if it were his own. This wasn't about transportation, it was about establishing ownership. When pulled over, his immediate response wasn't to handle the situation himself like any responsible adult would, but to demand she drop everything and solve his problem. Think about the psychology here. He could have called his own insurance company, handled the citation himself, or simply waited for her to return home. Instead, he chose to turn his problem into her emergency, testing whether she would still jump when he called, still prioritize his needs over her own boundaries. Merseana probably felt that familiar knot in her stomach, the one that forms when you know something feels wrong but can't quite articulate why. She had been building the courage to leave, establishing her independence, and now here was Finley, once again making her responsible for consequences of his actions. But she went anyway, because that's what victims of psychological abuse do. They continue trying to be reasonable with fundamentally unreasonable people. She grabbed Shawnee Drury's roommate for support, perhaps sensing she shouldn't face this alone, and headed out for what should have been a simple errand. The drive to the supposed location probably felt tense. Was Merseana already sensing this was unusual? Did she express doubts to the roommate? We never know her exact thoughts, but victims of abuse develop hypervigilance, constantly scanning for signs of manipulation, lies, or danger. When they arrived at the location where Finley claimed he'd been pulled over, her worst suspicions were confirmed. He wasn't there. No police cars, no traffic stop in progress, no stranded boyfriend grateful for rescue. The entire scene was empty, normal, undisturbed. For most people, this would be confusing, but not alarming. Maybe you got the location wrong, maybe the stop ended quickly. But when you're dealing with someone who systematically controls every aspect of your life, every inconsistency feels suspicious. Every lie, no matter how small, feels like a test of whether you'll call out the manipulation or quietly accept it. Merseana probably felt that sinking realization. This wasn't about insurance cards, or traffic stops, or even practical problems. This was about something else entirely. But what? And why the elaborate deception? The roommate likely witnessed Merseana's growing unease as they searched the empty street. Maybe she called Finley, demanding to know where he was. Maybe she felt foolish for falling for what now seemed obviously like a lie. Maybe she felt angry at being manipulated once again, or scared about what this really meant. So they returned to park at Cumberland Apartments, probably discussing the strange situation during the drive back. Merseana might have been analyzing the inconsistencies aloud, trying to make sense of Finley's behavior, wondering if she was overreacting, or if her instincts were right to be screaming danger. But when they pulled into the familiar parking lot of her apartment complex, the true nature of this insurance card emergency became crystal clear in the most chilling way possible. There was Nicholas Finley, sitting in her Honda Civic, waiting for them like a predator who had successfully lured their prey exactly where he wanted them. Not standing beside the car apologetically, not grateful for her help with his supposed emergency, not even pretending the insurance card story was real anymore. He was sitting inside her car, her property that she had purchased with her own OnlyFans earnings, like it was his throne. Like he had every right to be there. Like her independence and ownership meant nothing. This wasn't about insurance cards or traffic stops or even practical problems. This was psychological warfare designed to answer one crucial question. After everything Merseana had done to establish her independence, after all her talk of leaving, would she still submit to his control when tested? Would she quietly hand over the insurance card and accept his dominance over her property? Would she avoid confrontation and let him continue treating her car as his own? Would she choose peace over principles, compliance over independence? Or would she finally do what he feared most, assert ownership over her own life? When Merseana stepped out of the roommate's vehicle and approached her own car, her heart probably racing with the adrenaline that comes from recognizing you've been played, she was walking into the most dangerous moment of her life. Because there's nothing more threatening to an abuser.
What happened next proved this was never about paperwork, never about a simple favor between partners. This was about a man who couldn't tolerate a woman acting like she controlled her own life. The confrontation escalated with terrifying speed. As Merseana approached her car, ready to reclaim her property and assert her independence, Nicholas Finley drew a pistol and fired shots directly into her. Just like that, an ordinary afternoon became a nightmare. But here's what makes Merseana's story both heartbreaking and inspiring. She didn't just accept her fate. Wounded but not defeated, she immediately fled, running through the apartment complex in a desperate bid for survival, proving that even in her darkest moment, she was still fighting for the life she'd worked so hard to build. Shawnee Drury suddenly found herself thrust into real-life horror. "My boyfriend pushed me back in the house and we just went in the bathroom," she recalled, voice trembling months later. "I just had my hands over my head and I was praying because it was so loud. I thought he was coming in the house." But Finley wasn't content with attacking just Merseana. He kept saying he was going to kill everybody in the house who was trying to help her, Drury remembered. This wasn't random violence. This was calculated psychological warfare, ensuring Merseana would face her final moments completely alone, with no one brave enough to intervene. In her frantic search for safety, Merseana managed to reach Shawnee's truck, probably thinking she'd finally found sanctuary. But Finley was relentless. He approached the truck and fired 4 or 5 more shots through the windows, shattering glass and any hope this ordeal might end with her survival. Somehow, incredibly, Merseana was still alive, still moving, still refusing to give up. She got out of the truck and continued trying to escape, her will to live and love for her son pushing her forward even as her body was failing. But Nicholas Finley was far from finished. What he did next should forever change how we understand domestic violence and the deadly combination of control, possession, and male entitlement. As Merseana collapsed near Shawnee's front door, wounded and defenseless, Finley approached with the calculated precision of an executioner. He stood over her and fired 8 more shots into her body. 8 more shots into a woman already down, already defeated, posing no threat to anyone. He shot her like 8 more times, Shawnee testified. It was just so senseless, very, very senseless. This wasn't self-defense or even anger. This was the ultimate assertion of power, the power of life and death over someone he'd decided belonged to him. But Finley wasn't finished asserting ownership. After executing Merseana in the most brutal way imaginable, he took her purse and drove away in her car. The capital murder charge includes not just the shooting death, but robbery of her car and purse. Prosecutors believe the theft was either a motivating factor or part of his calculated response to her independence assertion. He killed her for daring to act like she owned her car, then stole that car as his final act of possession. He murdered her for refusing to share her OnlyFans earnings, then took her purse containing the fruits of her labor. The symbolism is chilling. If Merseana wouldn't voluntarily give him everything she owned, he would simply take it all anyway, including her life. Merseana Struggs was pronounced dead on the scene. She was 29 years old, had built a thriving online business, moved to Houston seeking fresh starts, and dreamed of owning her own home. She died because Nicholas Finley decided her success, property, and life all belonged to him. Harris County Sheriff's Office responded swiftly to flooding 911 calls. Multiple witnesses, scattered shell casings, and a victim whose injuries told the story of prolonged, calculated violence made this case straightforward. Catching Finley proved simple. He fled in Merseana's car, easily trackable. Deputies located him shortly after and arrested him without incident. No chase, no standoff. Just a man who committed execution-style murder, then tried driving away like nothing happened. He was charged with capital murder and remains in Harris County Jail with bond denied, awaiting trial while a community heals and a boy grows up without his mother. But Merseana's murder isn't isolated. It's a symptom of an epidemic destroying families nationwide. Sheriff Ed Gonzalez delivered a statistic that should terrify everyone. Intimate partner murders comprise 35% of all homicides in unincorporated Harris County. More than 1/3 of murders involve someone killing their romantic partner. This isn't happening in distant crime-ridden cities. This is suburbs, apartment complexes, neighborhoods where kids play and neighbors know names. The Houston Area Women's Center emphasizes that when someone tries to leave an abusive relationship, their risk of being killed increases by 75%. With a gun involved, that risk jumps to 500%. Nicholas Finley was armed with a pistol, making Merseana's case a tragic example of this exponentially heightened risk. Think about her story through this lens. She had successfully built financial independence through her OnlyFans business, established autonomy that should have been celebrated. Most importantly, she had decided to leave Finley for good, actively disengaging from an abusive relationship and asserting her right to own her car and keep her earnings. That decision to leave, that refusal to continue being controlled, that's what cost Merseana her life. As Chenika Brown, Chief Program Officer at Houston Area Women's Center, explains, domestic violence manifests in various forms: physical, sexual, economic, financial, and mental abuse. Finley used every single tactic: controlling her car, demanding her business earnings, isolating her through intimidation, and ultimately resorting to deadly violence when she refused to submit. Her story plays out across America every single day. The only difference is most of these murders don't get the attention they deserve, don't spark the necessary conversations, and don't motivate changes that could save lives. As Sheriff Ed Gonzalez stated, love shouldn't hurt. But for too many people like Merseana, love became possession, possession became control, and control became a death sentence. Understanding how abusers think is crucial for preventing future tragedies. The insurance card incident reveals everything about the abuser mindset. Domestic violence is rarely about love or passion. It's about power, control, possession. Abusers don't see victims as partners, they see objects to be owned and controlled. This dehumanization makes extreme violence psychologically possible. Warning signs to recognize: financial control. Does your partner control money, car, resources? Use your property as if theirs. Isolation. Do they separate you from support systems? Escalating possessiveness. Do they act like they own you? Extreme reactions to independence. Do they become angry when you make autonomous decisions? Threats and intimidation. Do they use fear to control behavior? If you recognize these patterns, understand it doesn't improve alone. Control escalates, possessiveness grows, violence increases. The only survival method is leaving safely, with help, with plans, with support from people who understand the dangers involved.
The insurance card Nicholas Finley requested on July 19th was never about paperwork. It was about testing control, asserting dominance, and ultimately punishing a woman who had the audacity to build her own successful business and act like she owned her own life. Merseana Struggs paid the ultimate price for pursuing financial independence, for refusing to share her hard-earned income with a man who felt entitled to it, for believing she deserved to drive her own car without asking permission. But her story also represents everything right about the human entrepreneurial spirit: the courage to start over in a new city, the determination to build financial independence, the love that drives a mother to work tirelessly for her child's future. Every person watching this who learns to recognize warning signs of digital age abuse potentially saves lives. The woman being pressured to share her OnlyFans earnings, the partner whose boyfriend constantly borrows her car, the entrepreneur whose success makes her partner controlling, they need to hear Merseana's story. If this case impacted you, take action right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Stories like this need telling. Share this video. Someone in your network might be living their own version of Merseana's story. Start conversations about financial abuse and digital control. If you or someone you know needs help, reach out. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, available 24/7. Merseana deserved to see her son grow up, to achieve her dream of home ownership, to expand the business she built through determination and hard work. We can't give her that life back, but we can make sure her death means something. We can honor her memory by refusing to let other successful women be murdered for the crime of independence and entrepreneurship. We can be voices that speak up when financial abuse is disguised as sharing expenses. We can be the change that prevents the next tragedy. Merseana's story ends with her death, but our response is just beginning. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for being part of the solution. Your voice matters, your engagement saves lives, and together we can build a world where no successful woman dies for refusing to share her earnings with someone who didn't earn them. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and keep fighting for justice for victims like Merseana Struggs.